Welcome to another episode of the Raise Recovery Podcast. Thank you for being back. If you're new here, we welcome you. If you're a returning guest, I'm glad that you have found some value in this channel. So today we have with us Toby, and Toby is a guy who joined my recovery group that I started up, a good year ago. And I always like to tell how I meet people or met people originally. So I just start off with that because it's interesting to me. We happened to go to the same church, and after church one Sunday, me and my fiance always go shopping after. And we were at the grocery store, and I happened to bump into this guy, and we were just talking as strangers in a store and having a couple laughs and didn't think much of it. And 2 weeks later, he comes into the recovery group. And I was like, hey, I think I know you. You're that guy in the store. And we were talking about this and that. And he says, yeah. So it's really interesting how people get aligned, how God aligns people come into your life. And I've gotten to know Toby over the past year or so. And he's been a really vital member of the group and does a lot in recovery and helping others. And so I wanted to bring him on today to tell his story and hopefully add some value to your life and your recovery. So without anything further, I'd like to introduce you, Toby. Thanks for being here today.
Oh, Ray, thanks for having me. It's funny when I look back and we bonded over ice cream
Yeah.
at Aldi. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yes.
yeah, but Ray asked me to kind of tell a little bit about my story. I struggled with alcohol for the better part of 3 decades. I know that's, for a lot of people, especially younger listeners, that's a long time. And, a lot of what drives kind of why I want to help people, who are struggling with this disease of addiction is that, boy, oh boy, if I could turn back time and talk to that young man, and know what I know now, I certainly would do that, and because, when your life is on this side and you're in recovery, it's just so much better than the life you leave behind. So, like Ray said, I do a lot of speaking, a lot of mentoring, and, one of my highlights of my week is our Monday meeting that I do with Ray and that group, because it's, a group that's, the recovery's founded in Christ. And that's really, for me, I tried a lot of different ways, but until I gave it over to God, nothing seemed to work for me, so to speak. So, if you look at me as a little older, right, you too can do this. Sometimes it takes up people a little longer than other, but my encouragement is never quit. I mean, when you recover for the right reasons, and number one, as Ray will tell you too, is for yourself. Everyone around you will benefit from it, and just stick around long enough for the miracle and you'll know exactly what Ray and I talk about when we talk about recovery. So my story is, I grew up as the youngest of 6 in a very small town in Pennsylvania. Thought my childhood was pretty good. I was a 3-sport athlete. My parents were polar opposites. Mom was a nurse. My dad was in the Navy for a few years. And then when he retired from that, they had me, being the youngest. I'm sure they weren't, I know my dad wasn't. He wasn't thrilled about being a dad at 40. It kind of showed in the parenting. I was kind of like always kind of overlooked, so to speak. But I will not ever blame, my alcoholism on my upbringing, because by and large, as Ray will attest, I'm a man of accountability, and I am here to this day because of the choices that I made, right? But, along the line of my recovery, it did kind of help me that there were some, lies that I had believed about myself, that probably came from my dad, who didn't mean to do that. But it just kind of instilled in me these feelings of, I wasn't worthy or valuable or any of this other nonsense that I literally asked God to remove, and he did. So, I kind of, my journey with alcohol was always kind of centered around fun, right? I didn't really drink a whole lot in high school. I did sports, but when I went to school and college, without supervision and anything like that, I discovered binge drinking and really, just anything goes type attitude. And, when I graduated, I had met my now ex, but when I graduated, I just couldn't turn it off. That binge drinking mentality was just kind of stuck with me, and I always thought it was cute, funny, looking back, incredibly immature. When we would go out, I'd hand the keys to my wife and say, "Okay, you're driving the night. I'm gonna go get Blotto," and I often did. In fact, I always do. So, when you look back on some of that stuff and you go, boy, I really would like to talk to that kid, but now I get to talk to other kids maybe and maybe help them point in the right direction. But, I just, kind of, it just kind of evolved to Friday night, Saturday night, just absolute, binge drinking. That eventually evolved into kind of going out after work for happy hour into binge drinking, and always looked at it as like it was fun. It was fun, 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 fun. And then, I just kind of we started having children when I was about 27, and my ex would, looked at it like he's finally gonna grow up, he's finally gonna grow up, but not really, I found a way as any good abuser of a substance to kind of make it work, right? So I would just change my drinking according to kind of my responsibilities at the time. And, a lot of my responsibilities where had a big job and I was traveling and covering many, many states, and without anybody kind of to kind of, rein Toby in, I always say I kind of like was Jesse James of the Northeast, I covered 14 states, but I just did what I wanted. Right. A lot of hotel bars, a lot of lost nights, a lot of, and then, I'd come home and I'd be the perfect dad for, a Friday night, and Saturday I with the kids. And, you know, but it was at that job where I actually had my first kind of run in with it. I was out in San Francisco and I had, three or four drinks before dinner. And you know what they say, you do the wrong thing or the right thing sometimes in front of the right person, you're going to get called out on it. And I got home on a Saturday. Monday, my boss called me and said, "Yeah, my boss's boss observed you and thinks you have a problem, and wants you to go away and get some help. Just a couple of weeks, just a couple of weeks." And I said, "Yeah, okay. Your job's going to be here when you get back." And the funny thing is, all I heard when I went to rehab that time was I heard 2 weeks, and I just went and did 2 weeks. Kind of got out of there, and I really got it out, in pure sobriety for, you know, over a year, right? And then kind of was like, I'm good, which is, usually the first sign that you're in trouble, right? Kind of step back in. But that's Ray, that's when I really changed my relationship with booze to kind of a different level. Instead of going out, to drink, I just stayed in.
Yeah.
When I travel, I would just stay in the hotel room, like, just like you're, like a hermit, And when I got home, it didn't matter what we were doing. 9:30 at night, I needed my medicine, so to speak, right? And when I look back on it, that's exactly what I was doing. I was medicating to get rid of the lies that I believed about myself. Medicating to like the person I saw staring back at me in the mirror. And, that kind of went on, for 5, 6 years, where I wasn't really, probably the quietest, abuser of alcohol in the history of time, but it was, it was destructive, right? It was destructive to my wife, to my kids. I look back on that and look at the thief of time that I was, right? And so eventually kind of fast forward a few years doing that, you know, and, had strung together a decent amount of sobriety kind of in between that time. I'm good, so I'll quit. I'm good, so I'll quit. And then I'm back on it. And I woke up one morning and I think it was 2016. She said she'd had enough. And quite honestly, and I look back on it, I don't blame her, because with the shoe was on the other foot, I don't know if I would have even hung out as long as she did. Right. So
Yeah.
went off to rehab, but this time around, I was committed to doing 30 days in it, and but when you get as long in as we do, right, you have time to reflect on it, and I look at it and I go, well, I did it, but I didn't do it for the right reason, right? I was trying to save a marriage, save my family. I went in and I put the time in and, I did 30 days. It didn't make a bit of difference, right? I mean, when I got out, she had already decided that she was done. I mean, I always say women stack post-it notes over time.
Yeah.
They're thin little issues, but boy, when they stack up to the point where, they'd had enough, they had enough. And
Yeah.
so, lost my marriage, lost, my kids, their respect, and, you know, went a good another 3 years, 3.5 years of sobriety. And notice I keep using sobriety, right? Because it wasn't recovery. So, I was pretty good up until, COVID rolled around, right? And so COVID rolled around and I just found myself a person of routine with no routine and relapsed again. And this time it was, it was quick, it was short, but it was intense, right?
Mm.
And had decided, kind of, I went to see my now girlfriend who's stuck by my side. God love her. And she, I went up to see her on Saturday, and this was after like a week. I mean, it literally was that fast that I fell. And I was sitting on her couch and she's like, "What's wrong with you? You're like sweaty and all this other stuff." And I'm like, I don't feel all that great. And she goes, "Well, you kind of don't smell all that great." And she goes, I didn't think you drank. And for a year I hit it. Right.
Yep. Wow.
I was just kind of dipping in, dipping out, kind of like, I do it and I'd like, man, I can't do this. I know I got a problem. Right. And I'd dip in. I did first time and I went another 3 months. Imagine the torture of that. Right.
I get it.
I'd beat myself up. I'd wait 3 months. I'd drink again. I'd wait 2 months. I'd drink again. But when the wheels fell off, it was about a week. And I was sitting there on the couch and she like put her, hand up to my carotid and she goes, your heart's really beating hard. And she took my blood pressure and it was like 200 over 195 or something like that. It was,
Jeez.
she's like, we need to go to the hospital. I'm like, no, I'll be okay. I'll be okay. So I kind of came clean, for the first time in my life. I was like, I just laid it out on the table. I said, I've got a real problem. Yeah. The
Mm.
byproduct of my problem is that I drink to forget, but I said the insides of me aren't right in my head, and for whatever reason, I don't like me. And that night, she found a Christian recovery center for me, and you know, at work, they were kind of like, "Yep, we smelled you at work. We thought you were drinking on the job." And I went and didn't know if my job was going to be there when I got back, and it is. And as it turns out, it wasn't. Right? I mean, I'd kind of burnt the bridge, but went to rehab and did 30 days there. But the difference was when I got there, I was completely defeated. You know,
Yeah.
for the first time in my life, I was waving the white flag. I was just like, is this really what you want? You can't do it on your own. It's really obvious that you can't. And when I got there, I'll never forget, I sat down on a bench and it was a wooded area of a very rural rehab center. And I just kind of said this to God. I just said, Jesus, I cannot do this anymore. I just cannot do this anymore. This is not the legacy I want to leave. There are lies inside of me that I believe that I picked up a long time ago. No fault of my parents or no fault of my dad. And I said, but would you just remove this stuff from me, and help me kind of defeat this thing once and for all? And when I stood up from that, I felt different. And I know it sounds weird, people, but I just felt different because the combination of defeated and leaning on Jesus, it was what I needed to do. I needed to be brought to my knees, so to speak, and not realize that I'm the smartest man in the room because I'm not, and when it comes to this aspect of my life, I certainly don't know better than others. Right. So people like Ray, people in recovery groups, I pick up tidbits all the time on this, but
Mm.
because I gave it over to God, it hasn't been the hardest run of my life. It's actually been the most unbelievable blessing I ever got in my entire life. So got out in 30 days, got home on a Saturday. On Monday, did not have a job. They just said the risk was too much for them, with what I do for a living. And while when things closed, God, if you do the right things, always provides, right? So I had been talking to another firm before I went into rehab, and when I got home, I told them the unbelievable amount of yarns you can weave when you're sick. I said I needed to go away for 30 days. I'm going to go see my daughter in Florida, and I just wove a pile of BS this big, And when I got back, there was a call on my voicemail that said, "Hey, you need to call us. We're interested in moving forward with you." So lost a job on a Monday. On Wednesday, I accepted another one, and kind of, when I look back on it, I'm like, God is great, man. And all the time, and all the time, God is great, because I don't think I deserved it, but for whatever reason, he saw fit in me, and Jesus saw fit in me to save me. And it's been, I'm in my fourth year, and I look back on this and where I am now and where I was then, and I always tell people is like, you'd have never pictured me as an alcoholic, but that's what I am. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you dress nice or drive a nice car. We all put our pants on the same way, right?
Yeah.
And because of that, I'll never walk by somebody in need or somebody who struggle with this, because it's such an insidious thing. But I look back on it now, and here I am, a top producer in the company, highly respected. It took my kids a hot minute to kind of forgive, but this is a true story, no exaggeration. I was talking to my daughter this morning, who's in Florida, and I said, of all the things that you would expect from Dad, what's the last thing you'd expect from me? She goes, "You drinking ever again?" She goes, "Dad,"
Wow.
she goes, we all, know in our hearts of hearts that you have absolutely slain Goliath. That you are the modern day David, and you you know you you have defeated that giant. And it's so, what an amazing few years, right? I mean, where you go from they didn't trust a word I said to would absolutely, sign in blood that that's something I wouldn't do again. So
Wow, that's amazing.
yeah, I always tell people, stick around long enough, the miracle will happen. It really will.
Yep. Yeah. I think a lot of people do bow out before that happens, or they just don't give it enough time, or they're not ready. There's several things you said that I know I've experienced, and a lot of other people I've met in recovery have expressed. Number one, trying to manage the using whatever substance, it's all the same. Trying to manage that, hiding it, not thinking it's that big of a deal at first. It's a progressive thing. And then definitely been in the situation of going to rehab to try to save a relationship myself before, until I realized it had to be for me. Like I had to
Yep.
want this for myself, regardless of who's in my life or not. And then definitely the third thing is, you've probably heard it called the God moment, the gift of desperation, God.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what you had, because I had a moment like that too, where just so defeated, I just did not care anymore. And unfortunately, for some of us, it has to get to that point where we're so broken that it's like, okay, now I'm ready. So yeah,
I mean,
appreciate you sharing that with us.
no problem. And one of the things too, that it's like, when you have a connected, intimate relationship with Jesus, you realize certain little things in life, right? We are all going to have problems. I'm sorry, nobody has the
Yep.
perfect life. I don't care who you are, right? I mean, Jeff Bezos
Mhm.
from Amazon, he had
Absolutely.
his problems. Right? His divorce just cost $1 billion versus the rest of ours, right? But
Yeah. Yeah.
we all have problems, right? But I believe that God dishes us problems to see how we're going to handle them to give him the glory, right? And so many
Hmm.
times I think a lot of people get kind of misdirected in, like, the question of, why is this happening to me? Why are you doing this to me, God? Why are you doing this? My question is back to God, is this: what do you want me to learn from this? How can I give you the glory in how I handle this problem? Completely different orientation. instead of going, why does it happen to me? Poor, pitiful me. I turn it around and go, God, what do you want me to learn? There is
Mhm.
absolutely learning in here because problems present opportunities and opportunities for growth, and it has helped me a great deal in like dealing with life, right? It's life, never ending stream of curveballs from God. But when I turn it around and go, God, what is it that you want me to learn from this? Because I know there's this problem is an opportunity, right? And taking the
Yep.
time and slowing down and thinking about it helps a great deal because I think that's half the problem why recoveries are hard is because people don't slow down enough to really focus in on them and the kind of the gifts that the gift that you have received, right? So
Yeah.
um
Yes.
it's funny. It's like I look at my life now as like it's normal not to drink, right? We don't need booze or
Right.
drugs to survive. Normal is this,
Right.
right? So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, there's one of the things you said, Toby, was for whatever reason you didn't like yourself and you believe that was why you drank the way you were.
yeah,
And I think there's addiction in my experience and understanding is an attempt to solve a problem maybe in the best way we knew possible at that time. But I believe it's always an attempt to solve some kind of problem, whether that's a bad situation that's outside of our control, growing up in a bad household, just not liking ourselves, being bullied. That
yeah,
turns into a stream of negative thoughts about oneself and limiting beliefs. So I think a lot of people can relate to that there is a reason for it. And I also wanted to point out how you said when you like started up again, it only took like a week for it to come burning down. And they say addiction is a progressive disease. And then when you stop and have a period of sobriety and then start again, it's not like you start from the beginning, like your first drink. It's like you pick up right where you left off. And it typically goes downhill really quick because your brain's already used to all that. You already have experienced it and the habits are still there. They're just kind of grayed out.
yeah.
So it's easy to slip back down into that. So yeah, I
People that,
wanted to ask you.
yeah. Go ahead, Ray.
go-
Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, what are some of the things that you do, like on a daily, weekly, monthly basis that are part of your own personal recovery? Things you do to help yourself stay clean and sober and accountable. Like what are gym, different
Oh,
things like
sure.
that.
Sure. So I like to say, for those people who understand how like jumbo jets stay in the air, right? They have these things called redundancy systems, right? So if this hydraulic fails, there's something in backup, right? That
Hmm.
comes in there and keeps that thing up in the air and keeps people safe. I look at my recovery is not all my eggs are in one basket, right? I
Yeah.
will, from time to time go to AA. I'm not the hugest AA because of Ray knows this. I'm not a higher power. I'm not a higher power guy. I'm a Jesus guy, and for me,
Hmm.
it's something I will never apologize for. Jesus saved me, and I am going to give him the glory. So, I'll go to an AA meeting if I'm traveling, because I can't find a Recovery Matters in a Ray group somewhere, right? But I go to Ray's meeting on Monday night. I have a Bible study that I do with, you know, men that I revere, and when it comes to, digging into the word of God, because to me, it's all in there, in the Bible. Basic instruction before leaving earth is what they say, right? So I do that. I go to the gym at least, 5, 6 days a week, sometimes 7. I have found that is a great way for me to keep my head on straight, so to speak, right? And
Yeah.
it's something that is entirely for me that is self-care, not self-destruction. And it's just for me, right? So when I was drinking, I always thought, oh, this is just for me. This is my time. And I was building up walls around me, right? Oh, this is my time. And I go and it just keeps me centered. So I go to church, every Sunday. And I see what I'm saying. It's just there's just all sorts of things around me. I mentor several people. I speak at 2 different rehab centers, usually monthly. I will share my testimony any place, anytime for people. And, I also will, do things like, take people to rehab centers when they ask me to, or they need to, or they don't have any other way to get there.
Yeah.
So I I have veiled myself and I have surrendered to this disease. But I always tell people I'm a financial advisor. That's my day job. But my purpose is staying on this path and helping others people get on it. You know, because
Amen.
I look back on what I've been gifted, and it's nothing short of a miracle. It really is.
And it's probably worth pointing out too. All those things probably came with time, I would have to
Yeah.
assume, because
Yep.
I know when I first got clean, it's like I had a lot of fears of how I was going to survive. When I went into rehab last time, I was homeless on the streets. And so I had all these fears of like, well, money and where I'm going to live and a car and et cetera, et cetera. And I wanted a good woman. And I learned that, I started off small. I started working out in the rehab, which I had a history of, being in shape before I got really bad into, drugs and stuff. But it's like we didn't like the literature says, we didn't become addicted in one day. So remember, easy does it. So recovery is, you're not going to just decide you want to be clean or and sober one day, and then 30 days later everything's in order and you got it all. It's a
Yeah.
progressive process, just like addiction, only in the upwards way instead of descending. So yeah, I'd say
I mean, in
only
many
they
times, Ray,
take
you're absolutely right. I mean, many times when people get out and they first start recovery, it gets worse. I mean, there's
right.
problems, and like I said before, problems present opportunities, right? It all depends on how you look at it, right? What are we going to learn from this?
Yep.
God's got a lesson in there for us somewhere, but many times that's what happens. It does get worse, and I always say that in a lot of my talks is like when you're in active, drinking or using or whatever your thing is that you're like a tornado, right? You're just bouncing around in the
Yeah.
middle of town. You're bouncing around in the middle of town, and then you get recovered, right? And then, you think like, hey, there's the sun. It's all cool. Things are calm now. But if you just do a 360 and look around you, there's destruction laying everywhere. And when there's that path of destruction, it takes time to rebuild it, right? I mean, it really
Yeah.
does. Many times because of our personalities, we're in a hurry. We're in a hurry. And you know what? Don't be, right? I mean, because, like me, it took decades to get it handled. It's probably going to be take decades to kind of fix it, but that's okay, right? I mean, time isn't our enemy, it's our friend. And if you have an internal
Mhm.
perspective, right? If you have this eternal perspective, what is it? I mean, so what? It's time,
Yeah.
right? You just let it go, and that was the one thing that I did do was when I recovered, I did not come out like, hey, there's no destruction laying around. I tried to see me through my kids' eyes, right? And
Mhm.
and understand that the hurt and the hurt is I don't have any legals or anything like that. But what the hurt really is, and I think people miss this in a great deal, is that when you have an unconditional love between two people, right? And they want nothing more than the best for you. And when somebody loves you like that, all they really want is they want to believe you, you know, they want to trust
Yeah.
you. And when you're telling them you're sober and stuff like that, they want to believe it in their heart of hearts, right? And then when they find out that you're not being as forthright as you appeared to be, that little wound gets cut deeper and deeper and deeper, right? And so sometimes when a wound gets super deep, it's got to heal from the inside out, right? And it can take a long time to do that. My encouragement to you is that the people who love you. They love you, but they hate the disease. And it's going to take a while for them to get past what the disease did to that relationship. So slow and easy, and
Yeah.
look at it like an investment. Grow that puppy long term over time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And, something I was told in early recovery was no major life changes in the first year. And honestly, the last time I got clean, the first year was like the crappiest year of my life, but I made it, but it's like I was already getting clean after so long, or sober, however you want to put it, after so long of drinking or drugging or both. It takes a while. That's a major life change in itself. And it's like, that's all I could personally handle at the time. And so like moving, getting in new relationships, it suggested no new relationships for a year, like romantically.
Yep.
Don't move locations. There's all these things like your job, don't work too much, don't not work. And so it was like no major life changes, because I'm already going through like the biggest life change I possibly could at that time. And so, yeah, I think it's just important to point out that it's okay to take it easy and give things time, despite I get wanting it now, but that's something I had to kind of reel in at first, is like, I just want to be better. I'm sick of this, to the point I just want it to be better. I just want life to be back to normal. And it takes time, like you said, the wounds have to heal, and
And
I
our
don't
and
always
our and our
control.
our brains have to heal too. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
I mean, it takes a while. I can't remember the statistics. It's like a year for every, I don't know. It's not a year for a year, but I mean, it's astonishing how long it takes. But the human brain does repair itself,
Yes.
and you're going to come out of it, and in a lot of ways, depending how long you were, I mean, you're going to start to look at life almost like somebody who had their eyesight restored, right? Like
Yeah.
as an adult, they couldn't see it, and all of a sudden you can see, and you're you're going to take it easy, because boy, you're going to feel things you maybe didn't feel before. You're going to see things you didn't see before, and we're on life to live, and sometimes it's not incredibly possible to like just isolate, and I'm not suggesting that, but like you're not a boy and a boy in a bubble, right? You are going to experience
Mm.
the life and life's kind of hurricanes of life, right? But my biggest thing is that don't go out and invent things to do, right? I mean, handle what you have, clean up your side of the street, and move forward, right? And when the time is right, don't you believe God will provide? Because that's kind of what I looked at, and so for my first couple of years, I did blocking and tackling. You know, I maintained the relationship I had. God love her, she stayed, right? I focused in on my job, but didn't overdo it. I didn't add workaholism to my already impressive resume, because I wanted to get deeper with my faith with Jesus. I wanted to, get deeper with my relationship with my gal. I wanted to expand my network, with in recovery. I wanted to get to the time, and I set goals like, I want to get to a point where I actually can evangelize for people in this area, right? No different than being a fisher of men, and evangelizing, to get more Christ followers. We're just trying to get more people to get on this boat with us, because people who are in it love it, and I love it. I would not change my life in any way, shape, or form. And if I look back on the journey, I don't know that maybe this is where God wanted me to be anyway, and it was his path all along, I don't know.
I, I have those same thoughts about my life. It's very interesting. Not what I expected when I was younger, but I have the same exact thoughts. Like, well, maybe this was just how it was supposed to be anyway, you know?
And it's what's cool too, Ray, is like, I mean, now where I am in recovery is, yeah, I used to like always say to people like, don't you want to have a drink? I'm like, no, I had my fun with it, blah, 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 blah. I used to make every, excuse or soften it or whatever. Now I just go, no, I can't. End of story.
Hmm.
You know, and I
Yeah.
really, I mean, this is important for me anyway. I really don't care what other people think of me. If people want to judge
Yeah.
me for following Jesus, go right ahead. If you want to judge me for not drinking, go right ahead. Because I love this about me, right? And
Mm.
and if that sounds selfish, okay, I can live with that, right? I'm good. You know,
All right. Yeah. Because it's not. It's definitely not selfish, in my personal opinion. And I'm right there with you. A lot of the time, my caring so much about what other people thought about me was a major contributor to my using. So kind of dropping that. And we still care to a degree what certain people do think. We want
Yep.
people who are close to us to think good of us, but you know, it was on a whole nother level of like everybody, even if I didn't know you, I just wanted people to like me. And if they didn't, that was such a disappointment and approve of my life and my actions. And if I didn't know what to do, well, what would you want me to do? And then I'll do that so you like me more. And it was just it's a very catastrophic way to live. So I totally agree with you. Yeah, like no matter what we believe, what we do, we're always going to have people who have something to say about it or don't like it. And that's totally fine because that's inside of them. That's their thinking, that's their perception. And so can't beat ourselves up over that or give it too much energy.
Absolutely. And I mean, and another thing that always keep in the back of your mind too as you recover is that it's not your words that matter. They don't matter anything. If you want to build trust, you want to build your relationships, you want to develop new ones, your actions. It's all about your actions. That's what people are monitoring, not your words. They're
Yep.
just words, right? So, through my actions is why I'm where I am, right? Not, I mean,
Right.
I can talk like the best of them, but they're just words, right?
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. 100%. So, what would be your kind of like final advice for anybody out there that might be watching this? Because who knows, people could see this years in the future, but what would be your advice to them if they're currently struggling with some addiction of substances? And also, what would be your advice to the loved one of someone struggling with substances, like on the other side?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm actually kind of experiencing that right now with a really good friend who recently relapsed and is back in a sober living facility, but somebody I love dearly. He and I have been friends for the better part of 35 years. And still for the first time ever, I'm on that side of it, right? Where, he was telling me he was good, he was good, he was good, he was good, and he really wasn't, right?
Mm.
So my advice to him was perseverance is defined by not quitting, right? Sometimes it
Yep.
takes people 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 times to finally get it. Took me 3, right? That's not, that's not great, right? But, I finally got it. But my advice to him was, you know what? If you finally do a recovery for yourself, right? And you are doing it for you and for God. That was my motivation. Me and God. Because I used to drink in privacy and I was so sick that I thought that, hey, if nobody finds out about it, it never happened. Yeah.
Right.
Jesus knew about it, right? So my advice to him was don't quit, you know, you know, we're going to keep trying for this. We're going to keep trying. We're going to keep trying. And for people that have loved ones that are struggling, do not hate the person. Love the person, hate the disease, right? You know, all you can do is consider, to keep encouraging them, to do it for themselves, because, you know, I don't give up on people, you know, ever, and I have to realize that in my friend's case, it's not about me, right? It's not about me.
Right.
It's like asking somebody to go to church and they say no. And you're like, it's about, no, it's not. They said no to God, right? And they didn't say no to me,
Right.
In this case, sometimes they're just saying no to recovery because they just don't know what they don't know. And eventually, if you keep trying, if you keep going after it, something is gonna click, and you are gonna have that what how Ray said it, that God moment. Or if you don't, that's not your thing, you will have an epiphany of some sort that you will
Yeah.
happen, and you will go, there's got to be more out there for me, and you'll believe it, right? And our convictions and beliefs drive behavior, right? So
Absolutely.
my best advice for you, or if you're struggling right now, is to find some quiet time and ask yourself, what are those lies that you believe about yourself? Because they're not congruent with God's word. They're not congruent with what God feels about you. I guarantee they're not probably even congruent with what I think of you, right? Or many of your friends. It's something in your brain. And once you reconcile that, where you've gotten rid of that lie, any kind of activating trigger that goes through that belief of yourself won't go through because it doesn't exist, right?
Right.
And once that happens and you start, you know, getting some success in recovery, if just keep trying and stick around long enough to experience the miracle because it's true. I used to hear these old timers 15 years ago and think, oh, they're just full of crap.
Mhm.
That's me being arrogant at the time, thinking I knew more. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to recover, it's real simple. Hang around people that have what you want. I know that's probably an AA thing or whatever, but hang around people that have what you want. It's no different than right. If you wanted to get good at golf, you play with people who are better at than you, right?
Yep.
I look at it like my faith journey. I'm hanging out with people that have been in the Word longer than me, have can counsel me through it, can maybe help me understand some. Because the reason I never even read the Bible is because I couldn't understand it, and people were like, "That your understanding is your understanding, and that's okay."
Mhm.
So really, that's what I have. So, and if you have somebody that's struggling in its family, like I can't stress it enough, Ray, just love the person, love the person and hate the disease because it's, trust me, it's like somebody who's dying. They know they're dying. They don't need to be reminded, right? What
Yeah. Yeah.
what they're looking for is a way out, right? And
Yep.
a kind ear. If somebody needs taken to a rehab center, take them. It's as simple as that. If they fall, lift them up. I mean, because without help, with people who quit end up dying. Well, we know that, right?
Yeah.
So I for one, and I know Ray's the same way with me on this. I'm never going to be a part of that, of quitting on somebody.
Right.
I just won't.
Right. Yep. Amen to that. Yeah. For where I've been and coming back from where I was, it's taught me that no matter how bad it looks, no matter how hopeless it seems, like I thought it was over, this was my destiny, was to die a junkie, like that's
Yep.
just how it is. That's how it's going to be. And so going through that and getting through that, it's like, whoa, well, if I can do that, I know that anyone can. So no matter how bad it looks, just hold the hope, and it can truly change no matter what you think or believe, how much it can't, it can, and it has. And we're living examples.
Yeah,
So
right. I mean, and it's
I
like
really,
I say that to people all the time. It's like, if I can do it, anybody, can, right? I mean, it really is
right.
true because at the end of the day, hold yourself accountable, right? You are where you are because of the choices you made, but you can choose your way out too, right? You just have
That's
to
right.
find what find what works for you. For me, it was, and for Ray, it's Jesus, I mean, and a whole lot of self reflection, and the willingness to be a grown ass adult and handle it,
Yeah.
so
Amen. Well, Toby, I'd like to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing, being vulnerable with us and open, giving us a lot to think about. And hopefully, this helps somebody out there and has an impact on their lives and their recovery, or the loved one of someone that's going through it. So, if anybody has any questions or comments, you can comment below this video. Reach out if you're interested in the in-person recovery group. It's near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Leave a comment. Be happy to give you that information. I'd love to give you the information. There's definitely a great need for Christian-based recovery, and there's not a lot of people out there doing it. So it can be challenging, and so if that's something that you're looking for and sounds good to you, by all means, please leave a comment. Be happy to connect with you, or leave a comment for Toby, and we'll get back with you. So, all right, Toby, thanks so much. I really appreciate it for doing this today. It means a lot.
no problem. Love you, my friend.
All right, love you too. See you soon.
You bet.
All right, bye, guys.
Bye.